Okay. Welcome to the fourth of six events for the Soil Health and Community Resilience Stories from the North series. This 2021 series is our third annual soil series. Tonight's event is called Healing the Land with Farm Animals. I am Melissa Larita Cole, tonight's facilitator and one of the organizers of this series. I'd like to first thank the other members of the organizing team, including Grace Gershuni, Becky Colpitz, Lauren Weston, Avi Bauer, and Kat Buxton. I would also like to thank all of you who are here this evening or watching the recording in the future. I want to thank those of you who are filling out our surveys. They are changing the way we are designing the event, so thank you. We are also posting all of the resources that you share at the bottom of the series webpage. Please make sure to check out all of the crowdsourced resources there. I would also like to thank all of our incredible partners who have made this series possible. The 50 plus organizations and businesses that you see on the bottom and side of your screen have helped us fundraise for our speakers, spread the word about these events, and shared countless resources with us that we are excited to share with you. We'd like to give a special thank you to the Cooperative Education Fund, the Vermont Healthy Soils Coalition, and the Littleton Food Co-op. To learn more about all of the partners and to take a look at all of the resources gathered from partners and through the pre-event planning survey, please visit our website for the series. Lauren is adding that link to the chat now. We would like you to all know that we are recording tonight's event. Additionally, we are keeping you muted and we ask that you keep your cameras off. Our team will be doing our best to keep disruptions to a minimum. We have a lot of wonderful content that our speakers want to share today, so the question and answer may be short. If you don't get a chance to ask a question, be sure to follow up on the Vermont Healthy Soils Coalition listserv. Depending on your version of Zoom, you should also have a button at the bottom of your screen called Live Transcript. If you click the arrow next to those words, you should be able to turn off or on an auto-generated live feed of subtitles for tonight's discussions. We apologize in advance if the transcription service captures any of the words incorrectly. The entire transcript will be saved and posted with the recording if people want to come back to it later and don't have access to it. And if you have any questions for us at any time, please submit them through the Zoom chat box. We would like to open this evening with a land acknowledgement. This land acknowledgement for what is referred to by some as the Northeast Kingdom of Vermont and the North Country of New Hampshire has been shared with us and others by Chief Don Stevens of the Nulhegan Band of the Coosac Abenaki Nation. Many of us are on the land which has long served as a site of meeting and exchange among Indigenous peoples for thousands of years and is the home of the Western Abenaki people. The team organizing this event today honors, recognizes, and respects these peoples, especially the Abenaki, as the traditional stewards of the lands and waters on which we gather today. In that spirit, today we will begin by acknowledging that we are guests in this land, and we need to respect and help protect the lands within our use. Additionally, we would like to take a few moments of silence to honor and respect the elders of the past and the present who were and are stewards of this land. Thank you. In making this series, we wanted to create a community for all to gather safely. We created a list of community values and guidelines that are being shown on your screen now. In this space, we agreed to respect and recognize all voices, lived experiences, perspectives, and worldviews. We seek to create safe space for learning and sharing. And we ask that we all use inclusive and respectful language. Violations of these values and guidelines will lead to removal from the event this evening by our team. Thank you for understanding. With those in mind, let's get to know each other. As you feel comfortable, please introduce yourself in the chat box with your name, where you're participating from tonight, and a response to the question, have you raised farm animals? If so, what kind? And if not, what would you most like to raise? We'd also like to announce the winners of our last event's raffle. Those winners are Mary Jane Morin, Charlie Costello, and David Govatsky. So congratulations. And now let's get to tonight's raffle and survey. We do have a post-event survey that shouldn't take more than 3 minutes to complete and will be sent out with a recording of tonight's event via Eventbrite. If you fill out the survey within 1 week of tonight's event, you will be entered into our raffle for prizes. The prizes tonight are a $25 gift card to the Littleton Food Co-op, Mighty Mini Micro Coloring Books from the NRCS, The Soul of Soil by Joseph Smiley and Grace Gershuni, Organic Revolutionary by Grace Gershuni, Compost and Worm Castings from Black Dirt Farm. And in addition, Chelsea Green Publishing has generously offered all participants of the series a 35% off discount code off of their books and more on their website, chelseagreen.com. The code is PWEB35, and it is good for all participants here tonight and watching the recording this spring. Thank you, Chelsea Green. If you are able and interested, please consider donating to the fundraising efforts for this series. We are still working towards our goal and appreciate any and all donations, which are tax deductible thanks to our fiscal sponsor, Rural Vermont. Lauren is putting the link to the donation page in the chat box now in case you feel inspired. Just before we get started hearing from our speakers, I wanted to talk about one of our primary goals. One of our goals with this series is to introduce community members to the wonderful farms and projects in their area to build the social mycelium. We do that through selecting speakers from the Northeast Kingdom of Vermont and the North Country of New Hampshire, but also through featuring a New Hampshire or Vermont agricultural project. Tonight's feature is about Fresh Start Farms in New Hampshire, and in a few moments, we will show you a short video about it. Fresh Start Farms New Hampshire is a collective brand for immigrant and refugee farmers participating in the New American Sustainable Agricultural Program, a program of the Organization for Refugee and Immigrant Success. Lauren is posting the link for Fresh Start Farms and the Organization for Refugee and Immigrant Success in the chat box now. I wanted to just mention that there are similar projects found in Vermont through the New Farms for New Americans program, which is a community-based gardening agricultural program for refugees and immigrants, and Pine Island Community Farm in Colchester. These are separate programs from the New Hampshire one, but are very similar in spirit. Pine Island Community Farm is a place where new Americans, people who originally came to Vermont as refugees, can be on the land again and grow or buy food that is hard to get in Vermont. It's a space where people can experience a Vermont that feels more like home. While Colchester can feel like a world away when you're living in the NEK, a local farmer from Waterford, Vermont, Roberta of Crooked Mile Cheese, sold her male goats to Pine Island Community Farm. So even though we can feel far away, I just wanted to know that there are these other initiatives happening that we can interact with or interface with in a variety of ways, and we wanted to make you aware of those. With that, okay, and now we're going to switch to the video of Fresh Start.
My name is Fatuma
Mohammed, and I'm from Somalia, and I live in Manchester. When I came here in the United States, I didn't even stay here for 2 years when I started looking for a place to farm. I was a farmer. That's the only thing I have done, nothing else. I don't know anything else.
Our mission is to integrate new arrivals into the community, but also help them become self-sufficient so we can get them off dependence on social services. That community access of local ground food, at the same time as we're helping farmers generate income, the interaction between the community and farmers is getting better. So it's just a nice thing to see happen in the community.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much.
Yes, we have a deep connection to the land. When we first started, there was challenges that we overcame a lot of it, and we have some connection to our customers now that we get to know each other. Right now, we don't own the farm, and the owner can say anytime that he doesn't want us here anymore. And we are very grateful that he let us farm all this time. My dream is to grow more and sell more so I can be more productive when it comes to the farm.
The farmers right now are in a stage where they want to develop co-op business model farming. They moved from being an incubator farmers to a larger scale business model farming. And the only way they can be successful in that part is if they have assurance of access to a land that has no barriers stuck to whether or not they will be having the land forever or not.
We, Russell Foundation, partnered with ORIS
We approached the landowners, knowing that Oris had been here for years, but never had security, and the landowners weren't sure what they were going to do. We devoted time and money to secure a contract to purchase the land, and the landowners, very generous in their vision in allowing this partnership to begin with, allowing Oris on the land, and then in being willing to sell the land for a fraction of the cost, about 40% of the value of the land, because they believe in this vision as well.
This is an opportunity for us to work together and make something happen for the better of the farmers, but also for the community to continue having access to local ground food.
What I would ask is, to help those who can help us in getting this farm, to help us so we have this farm, because right now there's uncertainty on how long we can have this farm. It would be a wonderful thing if we can own this land, because we do not want to stop farming until we die.
You have to dream for the future. So I want to have a career in this farming.
I bring my kids here, and my brother brings his kids here. He teaches them how to farm here, and they like it. They grow up here, but they like farming here. So if when we age out and we can no longer farm, if we own the farm, then our kids may be able to farm here.
I am so proud to work hard for my family, and I'll be very proud to leave a legacy doing the farm business.
With that, I am excited to introduce our speakers this evening. We will be hearing stories from Jeffrey Ellis and Rebecca Beidler, who have been farming at Piece of Earth Farm in Albany, Vermont since 2010. Diantha Jones from the Jones Farm, a small diversified hill farm in St. Johnsbury, Vermont. And Bill Fosher, who has 30 years of farming experience and works as a conservation planner working for the New Hampshire Association of Conservation Districts. And we'll begin tonight with Jeffrey and Rebecca.
All right.
Okay. So, hi, I'm Rebecca and Jeffrey, and we're at Piece of Earth Farm in Albany. And we've been here for, this will be our 11th season. We have a pretty small scale, about 1.5 acres in production, and grow a wide variety of crops, from mostly vegetables and fruits, blueberries, raspberries, currants. This is our farm cat. We make some hemp and make some herbal products and shiitake mushrooms on logs. And the whole farm is no-till. And we're not certified organic, but we do practice organically. And the animals that we've raised have all been like pretty small scale, and mostly for our own use or for small scale commercial, homestead level. But we've traded the various gifts of the animals into our farm systems in ways that we try to be preparing garden space or building soil, and try to utilize the animals to their fullest potential. Things like a chicken scratch or their poop in the right place can contribute a lot. And but we also want to make sure they have a good quality of life and are spending a lot of time out on fresh ground. So before our farm looked like the previous picture, it looked more like this. And it was kind of an overgrown hayfield, overgrown Christmas tree farm. We had to do a lot of tree clearing, and we left stumps in the ground. We don't have a tractor, so we just kind of wanted things to rot naturally. And we had heard that pigs can totally root out stumps and destroy the grass and make it plantable, but that's really not accurate. They can definitely do a lot to loosen things, but and they're very good at turning the soil, but it's not going to be pristine garden ground after that. So eventually, after we had the pigs in areas that became gardens, we moved them down to this lower field where we rotate them. They're in the foreground and chickens are in the background. And we got a different housing structure that little shelter there can be moved easily with 2 people. A little bit more heavy duty than our original tarp covered structure, which is not recommended for pigs.
Yeah, they'll eat the tarp and any dangling bits.
Yeah. So that field has been, as we've transitioned from overgrown trees, there's obviously lots of saplings and blackberries and all kinds of things that are in constant needing maintenance. So the pigs have been pretty great rotating through all that. They like to turn everything under, and we've eventually moved to just using 2 single lines of electric fence, which generally works pretty well to keep them in.
Yeah, much more efficient than the electronet fencing.
For 2 pigs, we found we try to keep them in 1 paddock for about a week and then move on. Otherwise, they can really start to damage the soil and make big holes. We've done a little bit of experimenting with food crops for the pigs. This is a mangle beet. You can pick the tops and then feed them the roots too.
We even marketed the tops as like a bunch chard. It's quite good. So it's a nice dual function crop.
Weeds are also a great thing. Apples, things like that. Yeah. So laying hens are the next group of animals that we've raised. And you can go to the next one. The first year when we were starting to build gardens at our space, we had our laying hens in chicken tractors, shown here. Most people move chicken tractors like once a day to fresh ground. We were doing something called a deep mulch system, where you would keep each tractor in place for about 2 weeks and every day throw hay in, or a grass or other things, materials. And eventually you get this thick mat of layers of chicken poop and compostable materials. And we, throughout the whole summer, moved them about 100 feet and created these mats behind them. We were hoping that they would kill the grass and we could plant into them later, but it didn't kill the grass. So we ended up kind of lifting the whole mat up, putting cardboard underneath, and then eventually turning them into gardens. This is the same spot a few years later. So it added a lot of fertility, even though it didn't kill all the grass. In the wintertime, for quite a few years, we kept the laying hens and the ducks in our hoop house. And the first year we put this hoop house up, it was total sod in there. And then throughout the winter, we were adding a lot of mulch materials, and the chickens were scratching and pooping. And we had their roost that we could move around to different locations, so it spread out the poop. And by spring, it actually did a really good job in there of smothering the sod. And we were able to plant in there and have a pretty good crop. And that was a successful winter housing for maybe 5 years. And then we had a predation problem with a raccoon one warm February. So we don't do that anymore.
Yeah, it was challenging in the wintertime. His challenge is to electrify around the greenhouse with all the snow, and so we had to move them.
Yeah. After the chicken tractors, actually they got crushed underneath the roof. So we moved on to a different type of mobile structure. This is a chicken house that we used to move it with human power, but over like log rollers. And it was really heavy. We did it for a couple of years, I think. The idea is that they sleep in there at night to be safe, and then they have a fenced area to graze during the day. Eventually we moved that, we just kept it stationary and brought things to the chickens instead of them going to fresh grass. And so here we're trying to utilize their scratchability to make compost. In the background, there's, previously that was in pallets, and we would fork it, and they would keep scratching and fork it again. So it was one way to utilize their talents to make some compost. In the place where they're permanent place they're living now, we make more like windrows of compost that the chickens can access. This is their winter bedding and comfrey that we're starting to lay into a windrow. And we tend to fork it occasionally, and they'll scratch it down and we'll fork it back up. And it's one way to utilize their talents. We raise a couple of 1 or 2 batches of meat birds usually a season. That's what you're looking at there in the blue tarp structure. And we keep them inside the structure at night, and then they have free range in the fenced area, electric fence, during the day. And we raise freedom rangers, which grow a little bit. They take about 10 to 12 weeks to mature, but they're pretty good at eating all the grass and forbs and everything that's out there.
And we bring them stuff as well, various weeds and crops from the garden.
Mm-hmm. And we moved that whole fence with the house in it and the chickens without opening it up. We kind of like collapse apart and move it forward, so they stay inside of it as we move it to fresh ground about once a week.
And that structure, I don't know if you said that we can move that, one person can move that structure, so it's much lighter.
Yeah, it's PVC and chicken wire and no bottom. They've added a lot of fertility. So this was the only true grazer we've had so far. This was Lucky the ox, who we got him when he was already 5 and quite large, and he'd had some training. We didn't have that much training, and so there was challenges in trying to, we were hoping to get him to move logs and materials around the farm. And he kind of digressed in his respect for us and felt like it became dangerous eventually. So we did end up eating Lucky. And we would recommend, if someone wants to work with a draft animal, definitely having a good mentor nearby, or also starting with a young animal and like growing with them as they get bigger. But it was great being able to move someone like that around for grazing between all kinds of areas on the farm.
Yeah, and that in static manure piles, like in the wintertime, it was great to have that amount of manure to make compost with, whereas most of the other animals were moving around.
So ducks is the last group of animals that we have. We really like utilizing them for they love to eat slugs and snails and insects and dig around with their bills. But we don't let them just free range everywhere, because we're selling vegetables, and feel like manure can't be, they have kind of projectile loose manure, so you have to be careful having them too close to crops. So our strategy has been to move them in fenced areas around gardens, and then also once crops have finished, like in this picture, the asparagus is past its pickable state, we'll put them in there to clean up for future. And our original structure shown there was kind of like a house with like a wheelbarrow that you could move with them in it, but obviously there was a limit to how many birds we had. Eventually we moved to a stationary housing unit sited near our shiitake log yard so that they could keep down the slug population. And then we started moving them, walking them daily outside of their nighttime housing into different paddocks. So we'd have more flexibility of how far they could travel. Like here, they're cleaning up the garden in the fall. Lauren, could you play that video? It's just a little clip of how the ducks, they've been trained, now they'll move on their own from the paddock back.
And
Ready, girls?
So this is our last farm animal, Willow. She contributes in her own way. Here she dug a big hole in the cabbage patch and is laying in it, but all right.
But I think, having dogs and cats around are really beneficial for our farm, and it may help with, like, we don't have a ton of predator issues for the most part. So it could be part of that. Like one year we didn't raise pigs in the summer, and that was the year we had woodchuck issues, and then this year we have pigs again in the summer and wasn't that much of an issue. So
we're gonna pass the screen over to Diantha Jones now.
thank you, Rebecca and Jeffrey.
Okay, so I'm Diantha Jones, and my husband Mitchell and I own and run a little diversified farm in St. Johnsbury. But I would say that our focus is our flock of mostly Icelandic sheep. And we've been here for just over 3 years. We started really as a homestead. We just wanted to raise our own food, and then sheep just started multiplying as they do, and we started selling our lamb, and our customers loved it and wanted more, and so the flock grew and there was more demand for lamb. So we've done chickens and ducks and pigs and some cattle, but we just keep coming back to our flock of sheep. So this is what the farm looked like when we moved in. We sort of inherited a soil health experiment unknowingly when we bought the farm. We bought it in the winter, and when the snow melted, we noticed that something was wrong with this area in the back. There was like a step down in the pasture, and it's probably about a 2-acre area. And what had happened is there had been a bridge project that had been staged there, and they ended up just scraping all of the topsoil off and trucking it away. So what was left was this awful, bare, sandy, hard packed ground. And really all that was growing on it was ragweed. So that first summer, we couldn't even graze our small flock of sheep out there. So what we did do is we got a bunch of laying hens, got them in tractors, and just started moving the tractors over that area. And we still do every summer. These are what our chicken tractors look like. And we pull them forward one length every morning and every afternoon. And you can see the first tractor came through here and left this really nice dark green nitrogen rich soil, and you can see how the grass changes color in response to that. So these tractors probably cover this field twice a summer, 3 times in the summer. And additionally, we use the deep pack bedding method in our barn in the winter with our sheep. So this field also gets all of that bedding too. And so you saw what it looked like when we first bought it. I believe this is the 2nd summer. And then we were able to add sheep as grass started growing and other species started growing in that field. And then this is what it looks like now. This was last summer. So that's just 3 summers of circulating those chicken tractors, getting sheep on the pasture, and then also using the bedding from the barn. And it's really like, we couldn't have imagined that this pasture would have made such a quick comeback just with the chicken tractors and with the bedding, but it has been amazing. Those of you who are familiar with this netting fence, these poles have, I don't know if they're 3 or 4 inch spikes on the bottom that you can just push into the soil. The first 2 summers, we would bring a huge nail and a hammer out there and drive the nail into the ground where we wanted to stick each post, because the ground was that hard. I mean, there was no topsoil. It was bad, but we're working on it and it's coming along nicely. So this is just a quick video of what it looks like every morning and every afternoon. We just pull them forward 1 length. And that is nice because it gives the hens a chance to eat the grass, eat any insects that are there, but it doesn't give them enough time to start making holes. This is like really valuable pasture space for us, and we really don't want them tearing it up. So moving them twice a day like this makes it so they really just don't have time to be digging. So another thing that we've done as we've grown our flock is that we have grazed off of the farm. So the farm has 100 acres with it, but most of that is forested. And we talked about clearing forest and turning it into pasture, but ultimately decided that it was best for the climate to leave the trees and let them sequester carbon. And so what we did was we turned to local landowners who were mowing acreage either as lawn or brush hogging it just to keep it as open field, but weren't using it otherwise. And we're able to come up with simple contracts to graze our sheep in these places that would have otherwise been mowed. And so the first summer we grazed in Danville, and then this picture here is actually at the St. Johnsbury Academy's field campus, which is just less than a mile up the road from us, which is really nice. And this is a great spot because it's in an orchard and there's solar panels, and so we don't really have to worry about shade all summer for the sheep. We just bring our netting fence and water tubs and rotate them through the orchard. And this will be a really interesting experiment in soil health and building pasture, just because it was mowed as lawn essentially just until a couple years ago. And so it'll be interesting to see what the sheep can do for this pasture as well. This is bringing the sheep back to this field campus after summer shearing. that are happy to be back. And this is a beautiful spot. We do pretty intensive rotational grazing there. So we're there every day to every other day, moving the sheep, and we just spend some extra time soaking in the view. So this is what it looks like to move them. This is the pasture that they had been in, surrounded in this netting fence. And then we set up either just a portion of the next area they're going to be in, depending on how much fence we have, or the entire area. And then they get used to the move and they know what to do and they know what to expect. And they get very excited to move. So it's a lot of work every day, every other day. It's a couple hours, taking down fence, putting up fence, filling water tanks, but it's worth it for the health of the pasture and for the health of the sheep too. Moving them like this really reduces parasite load and potential for parasite load. And then we had last summer's drought, which was quite a challenge. Trying to get the sheep enough feed, not overgrazing. And so this is just a picture of some crispy brown pasture they were coming off of, and just trying to keep them moving fast enough to not overgraze. It was quite a balancing act, but we did it, and we hope that we left the pasture in great condition to start this next grazing season. So this is a picture of like our why we do this. We wanted good food for our families, and that sort of turned into our mission statement, which is growing food that's good for us, good for the land, and good for the community. And so this is our summer kitchen, we call it, which is just a grill and the table under the apple tree. Looks like we had maybe pork chops and green beans and cucumbers from the garden and some kimchi. And so this is what inspires us to keep going, is to be able to provide our family with this food and also to provide our community with it too. And then another reason we do what we do is to live as close as we can to a waste-free existence. And so for us, that means doing on-farm slaughter and butchering all of the meat that we are going to consume. And this can seem a little daunting at first, and Mitchell's really the lead on the slaughtering and butchering aspect. But we found that to butcher a lamb here at the farm and in our kitchen for our own family's consumption, all it takes is a boning knife, a bone saw, and a cleaver, and some way to package it up. So this is a time-lapse video of Mitchell butchering an entire lamb carcass. And I think in real time, it took him just 35 to 40 minutes. So it's really, it is daunting, but it is so doable. And so when we slaughter and we butcher at home, it allows us to use as much of the animal as we possibly can. We really value each of our animals' lives, and we try to honor that by not letting anything go to waste. And so this picture is a picture of all of the products that we harvest and produce from one animal. So these are all of the cuts of meat that go in the freezer. We take out these 4 leg bones. They make amazing dog bones. We just dehydrate them in the sun. And this is the trachea, which actually also makes an excellent dog chew. A lot of times we have so many extra of these leg bones. We sell them in the farm stand as dog bones. Then with the bones that we don't use as dog bones, we make bone broth with. And then this is the tanned hide. And this one we didn't tan at home, but I've now taken over all of our sheepskin tanning. So I'm doing all of that here on the farm. We make European mounts with the skulls, or I'll use the brains for tanning sheepskins. And usually the brain, when we harvest a brain, it's hard to get it out without ruining the skull. And so we usually take the brains out of skulls that don't have horns. And then what else is here? So we save the tallow, and we use that to make lotions and soaps and shampoo bars. And then these sausages here are actually pork sausage, but they're in the picture because we've started also harvesting and cleaning the lamb intestines and making our own sausage casings. So at the end of the slaughter and the butcher process, really all that's left that goes in the compost pile is the rumen and some of the intestine, and then some like fascia. So that's another one of our whys, is to try to honor each one of our animals by using as much of each of one as we possibly can. So that's all that I have. I will pass it on to Bill Fosher now.
Things looking right.
Looks good. Thank you.
Should be seeing a field. This is my farm here in Surrey, New Hampshire. I'm reluctant to call myself in the North Country because I'm in the southwestern corner of the state. As other folks have, or as was mentioned early on, I've been farming for 30 years. Had sheep for 30 years. I've actually been farming a little bit longer than that. I made the entry into the farming world with vegetables, and rented some land from a vegetable grower, and or rather from a sheep producer, and I really liked working with the sheep a lot better than I liked working with the vegetables. So I've stuck with sheep since then, and I've also raised pork, beef, poultry, both meat birds and egg-laying hens, and I've also raised a number of turkeys over the years. But the sort of constant thing has always been sheep in my farming operation. One of the things that I found really cool about sheep, and that helped me kind of start on my soil health journey, was that using sheep, I could take land that had been sort of abused or neglected, or was in need of some sort of improvement, and by carefully managing my sheep, I could really turn land around pretty quickly. Um, this particular field was full of goldenrod and thistles when I took it over. And I grazed it for about 8 or 10 years. Then I had to move away. I went down to Western Massachusetts and ran a big vegetation management service using sheep. I had at one point, I think we maxed out at about 850 ewes, and we were raising about 1,400 lambs a year. And then came back, and this field had been used by a local hay farmer for 10 years without putting anything back. So I got to start all over again. And so we're working on restoring this particular field for the second time. And one of the things that I've been really sort of interested to note is that animals are the only way that nature has to move nutrients up a hill. So the sheep can graze at the low side of a hill and deposit manure up at the high end. And once you understand that, you can manipulate where nutrients are deposited by how you structure your grazing system, by where you feed animals in the winter, or if you're using non-ruminants like chickens and swine, you can deposit nutrients by having their feeders in different locations where nutrients are needed, because they're going to congregate around those feeders, and that's where most of their nutrients are going to be deposited. I go see my sheep every day. Often I go twice. I'm using fairly high density grazing. This is a group of feeder lambs that I bought. This is, I think, about 3 years old, maybe 4 now. But this gives you an idea of the size of paddock that they're in. These animals were moving every day. And sometimes when I'm in rougher feed, I'll move them twice a day, so that I'm not trying to force them to eat stuff that they wouldn't, that they won't gain on. So my big goal here is to get these animals eating the right kind of feed so that they're going to be gaining weight and growing fast, or as fast as they can on grass alone. I don't feed any grain to my lambs. So in this picture, you can see on the right hand side of the picture, there's the paddock where they were yesterday, or the move before, and they hit that a little bit harder than I'd normally like. I'd normally like to leave a little bit more residue. Then right there in the middle, they're there with my old trusty livestock guardian dog, Luna. And I think they've probably only been in that paddock for, I don't know, maybe half an hour at the point this picture was taken. And on the left-hand side of the picture is the paddock that they'll go into the next move, whether that's later that day or the first thing in the morning the next day. I'm using, in this photo, I think I've got 8 or 9 pieces of electronet set up. One of the things that I've done, and I've learned a couple of things in 30 years the hard way. One of them is that my life is a lot better, and I think my sheep's life is a lot better, if I have the next move all set up and ready to go when I arrive, so that they don't spend a bunch of time yelling at me while I'm setting up fence. So I like to have that next paddock all ready to go. When I get there, I just turn off the Energizer and open the corner of the fence, and they pop right through. And you know, I've been doing this with different size groups of sheep. This is I think in this photo I've got probably 80 ewes and their lambs, so close to 200 animals. And you can see, you know, the size of the area that they're in is kind of highlighted by the you know, the different fence lines that you can see. This was taken in July. I apologize if it looks as fuzzy on my on your screens as it does on mine, but it's an old picture. But these sheep were on grass that was pretty mature, and you can see in the foreground there's been, you know, where they have already grazed, they've done a pretty good job trampling down the residue, and so this particular field with this system, I had enough animal pressure that I didn't feel any need to go in there after them and clip it to clean it up or anything. I just let them eat what they wanted and trample the rest, and then move them on. And these sheep were moving twice a day on this kind of feed. That's sort of what I was mentioning about the sort of rougher feed. I wanted to move them more often. I'm always looking at kind of trying to match the amount of feed that's available inside an electronet paddock to the number of sheep that are there for the amount of time that I want to have them in there. So, you know, as I get a larger group of sheep, I'm making a larger paddock. If I need them to stay there 24 hours rather than 12, it's a larger paddock. If I want to, you know, do something crazy like go away for a night, I'll move them in the morning, give them enough feed for 2 days, and I'll come back the evening of the next day, and move them for the next time. So I think, you know, 2 days is about the longest that I stay on any piece of grass at this point. And as important as it is to say how long I stay on a piece of grass, what's even more important is how long I stay off it. I think it was Miles Davis that said, it's not the notes you play, it's the notes you don't play. And that's how I feel about grazing. It's the time that you're off the field and letting it rest that matters the most. And the reason for that is that when your grass starts to regrow, it takes a while for it to recover from being grazed. And as it recovers from being grazed, it is doing two things. It's photosynthesizing from whatever leaves are left, and it's drawing on the nutrition that it has in the roots of the plant. If you graze it too hard, it doesn't have any solar panels left on the top to photosynthesize with, and it gets it starts to pull on the roots too much, and you start to have roots dying away. And this slide shows what 30% root dieback looks like, and you lose an awful lot of the depth of those roots, which is going to make your grass more susceptible to drought, because the top of the soil dries out a lot sooner than the deep parts of the soil. Also is going to interfere with your plant's ability, your grass's ability to be able to pull stuff up, minerals and nutrients up from down deep in the soil profile. And here's where that really comes in. Again, we're working right to left tonight, I guess, backwards to forwards. But if you take a grass plant and you clip the leaves off it every 2 days, you can see on the left there, that's what the roots end up looking like. And then 7 days, and then 21 days. And what I advocate for is at least 30 days of rest between, between the time that something gets grazed and when it gets have animals back on it. And really, I'm trying to aim more into the 45 to even 60-day range for a rest period. That just makes those roots that much more resilient, and makes it so that when you have a drought like we did last year, and I know in Vermont, the entire state is still in a state of drought. A lot of New Hampshire is too. Not all of New Hampshire, but a lot of it. We're relying on those roots more and more, and we need to make sure that we're not harvesting the roots when we're harvesting the tops too. And the way to do that is to leave a lot of recovery, and also to leave a lot of the grass behind. I love this chart because it really shows the magic of the old adage in rotational grazing about take half and leave half, and you can see where that comes from. So if you all the way down to taking 50% of the leaf at the top of the plant, you're having basically no effect on the root growth. As soon as you get to 60%, you're losing half of your root. And when you get to 80 and 90%, you're losing all of the root growth. And why that matters, again, is basically the resilience of the plants to recover from that grazing event. The other thing that's, I think, is really important when you're trying to think about grazing with ruminants, or with anything, but ruminants in particular, is that after about 3 days, the grass is going to start trying to regrow after it's bitten off, and that's going to make it's going to start to have really tender new shoots. So if you're leaving your animals behind on the same piece of grass for more than 3 days, or if you're not putting up a back fence and you're letting them just kind of wander around to go back to a water tank or something like that, you're essentially giving them a really fresh, to them, delicious bite, and to the grass, it's sort of the killing blow, because it's just starting to try to put up new leaves, and they're getting bitten off. So if you can manage to move your animals at least twice a week, you'll probably, just by doing that one thing, about double the amount of forage that you can produce on an acre of ground over the course of the season. And you'll also be sequestering a lot more carbon in the roots, because every time that a grass plant eventually goes through its life cycle and dies off, it leaves all of that carbon from the root system in the ground, and makes the ground more porous. All of the things that Diantha was talking about with that parking lot that her sheep are turning back into a pasture, it's because those grass roots have started to be able to open up the soil structure so that water can get in there, so that microbes can get some air, so that the ground isn't as compacted, so water can flow in. It's a really amazing system that will heal itself if you treat it just right. And that, to me, is like the coolest thing. I love just being a part of that process and helping to guide it from, kind of the wrong kind of agriculture. I don't like to use that word very much, but the kind of agriculture that will deplete resources or pollute ground, pollute nearby water, to the kind of agriculture that will improve soil health and will keep nearby water clean. So that's all I have for now. So I guess back to Melissa.
Thank you, Bill, and thank you all of our speakers. There's so much rich information there already, but we'll start with one question for everybody. If there was one thing you think someone should consider before adding farm animals or a new type of farm animal to their land, what would it be? And if someone's very eager to jump right out and do that, maybe I'm trying to gauge expressions there. Diantha.
I can answer that. So I would say that, you know, just like the basics are really important. So make sure you know who your vet's going to be. So when we first had sheep, we contacted the vet we wanted to use. They came out for a farm visit just so they knew where we were, knew where to find us, and then, you know, knew the animals that we had before any problems arose. So that's important. If you're just starting with poultry, then you probably won't have a vet. But where are you going to get your information when health issues do arise? And maybe that's a Facebook group or a mentor, which is another really important thing to have starting out with animals or a new animal. Who is that person that you can call night or day to answer questions that you have? And then if you plan to raise this animal for food, do you like to eat the animal? So people have come to us to tell us how amazing our lamb is, and how they've never eaten lamb like ours before. And really it comes down to breed. The Icelandic breed just has very delicate and mild tasting lamb. So make sure that you know that you like to eat what you're raising. And then if you're not planning on eating your animals that you're adding to your farm or your homestead, what's your plan for if that animal dies? So maybe you're looking into a larger breed of animal, but not necessarily planning on eating it. What happens if, you know, for some reason that animal dies, whether it's it gets sick or old age? What's your plan? And then I think that's it. I think those are my big ones.
Thank you. Rebecca and Jeffrey, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Sure. Yeah, there's a lot more than just one, so I think we'll both pick something. I just think it's really important to understand the commitment that's involved in raising critters. It's huge, you know, like some are more demanding than others, but you know, if you're a person who likes to take vacations a lot and travel, or you work 70, 80 hours a week off your homestead, or you're a single mother with 3 kids, like, just understand that those animals need your care every single day, all day long. And sometimes you'll think about them when you're going to bed, like, oh, is the roof going to collapse? Like, it's a big commitment. You know, sometimes I dream of not having animals sometimes, so we could maybe take a road trip cross country in the summer, you know, like, or whatever. But yeah, I think that's really important, because I think we underestimate that. Like when we got an ox, we really didn't have the experience and the skill set, and didn't realize how much of a commitment it was to have a bovine when we never had bovines before.
I think just basics about thinking about, do you have water access? Do you have water access in the wintertime? And things about understanding fencing, and depending on the kind of animal, you know, are you going to let it free range, or how are you going to keep it protected? Kind of think through the basics of how to fully care for an animal.
Yeah, protection's huge. Like making sure they're safe. Like one year we lost some ducks to a fox because we didn't have the fence electrified yet. And that was on us. And it really sucks that we lost these sweet little critters. It's great for the fox, but it sucks for them and us. And it was a big learn. We learned a lot from that.
Thank you. Bill, do you have anything you want to add?
Sure. I guess my first question would be to ask yourself why you want to get that animal, or that those animals, that kind of animal. What function are they going to serve on your farm and in your operation? Is it because you like the way they look? Is it because somebody told you that you can get rich quick? Just really question yourself about it before you dive in, because there's a lot of times that I see people that that get a certain kind of animal, and they get really stuck on that breed or that species or whatever, and it may not be suitable for the land that they're on. I think probably the most common example of that would be the domestic horse, right? People have a half acre in the backyard, and they've got a kid that wants a pony, and then the pony needs a friend, and then somebody's friend has a horse too, and before you know it, what you have in your backyard is dirt and mud and horse poop and a ever-growing pile of horse manure that you have nothing to do with, and no place to really safely dispose of it. So think those things through. Think about how you're going to manage not only the front end of the animal, but the stuff that comes out the back. Make sure that there's a place for that to go without causing environmental harm, without causing strife in your neighborhood. Make sure that you can contain the animal. All of these things seem to, like, they should go without saying, but I often in my job get called into situations where somebody's already in trouble, and the reason that they're in trouble is because they haven't asked those questions first. As the grumpy old man for you.
Thank you, Bill. I love that perspective. And then for any of you, well, specifically, we know Diantha and Jeffrey and Rebecca are having these diversified farm experiences. And I think, Bill, that might apply to you on your private farm as well to some degree. But what are the benefits of being so diversified, and what are the drawbacks, if any? And maybe we'll start with Jeffrey and Rebecca if you're up for it, because you certainly, through pictures alone, you were the most diversified presenter here for the night.
Well, diversity is just key in about anything you do, really. That's why we're not just vegetable growers, because, like last year when you have a drought, and if you're dependent on just growing vegetables, and you're limited. And when you have the diversity, especially in diversity in grazing, I think that you're creating a much richer soil biology with the different microbes and the different interactions between those different digestive systems, how those critters interact with the land, what their function is with the land, and especially if you're practicing biomimicry, like trying to mimic natural systems. And trying to mimic, like we use netting, fencing to keep the chickens in place, but they're out and about within a good sized space, so they can behave like chickens and act like chickens. And that's why we choose to, rotate pigs. I think their well-being is just as important. You know, like if they're happy critters, then I don't know, maybe they have happier microbes, and that creates a better synergy. But then you're also not just dependent on one thing. Like, you know, we raise the ducks for, you know, they're dealing with slug prevention and eating other insects and whatnot as we rotate them, but we also get eggs, and then we also get bedding. And some years, like in a dry year, they don't like it as much, and then we gotta, you know, haul water, so maybe they're not as vital, like vibrant as, so the chickens, they like it dry and warmer, you know, so they thrive in those conditions. So I think having that diversity is that it's like what's the word I'm looking for, like you have more of a balance and checks in place. So if one system's not doing as well, like last year we didn't have the greatest shiitake year, but you know, other things did well, and I think that's important, and that's why we strive to be diverse.
Right. The drawbacks, I would say, is if you have, sometimes it feels like we have too many different enterprises, and especially with our animals being such small amounts and having all these different fencing systems, it feels, you know, sometimes like overkill. But so you can, I think, get too diverse and maybe split the benefit too.
Yeah, the complexity can kind of outweigh the benefits sometimes.
Thank you so much. Diantha, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, so for us, the diversity sort of started with us just trying to fulfill our diet. So we wanted to grow on our farm what we wanted to eat. So that looked like a big garden that, you know, started to expand so we could sell more produce in the farm stand. The sheep and the pigs and the chickens, both for meat and for eggs. And so that's sort of why we have diversified. And then one of the drawbacks is that it just takes so much more time, right? If we had all sheep, we just have, if we go out to do chores, it's just feeding hay and water, right? But when then you add a milk cow, and then you add 2 pigs, and then you add some laying hens, and then you add some meat birds, and then you have your garden, and so you have all these great things, you're diversified, and it takes so much time. So I would say that that's the big drawback for us.
Thank you. And then Bill, do you have anything to add?
Well, I would just say that I think both of you guys, all of you guys, have really nailed the two sides of the diversity coin. If you focus on doing one thing and doing it well, then you know your life is going to be simpler. But there are going to be times when that one thing doesn't work out for a while. And conversely, if you're doing too many things on not enough scale to really invest in the sort of infrastructure that would make your life easier. You know, at one point, probably when I was at the most complex of my farming operation, I had sheep, cattle, pigs, laying hens, let's see, turkeys, and 3 batches of meat birds all on the ground at the same time. And like I couldn't do any one of those things well. I don't know if I mentioned vegetables, but you know, vegetables always try to kill me. I don't know what it is about them. They just, like, they're so relentless. People tell me animals are so unforgiving and require your attention all the time, but I think vegetables are worse. But you know, I just ran myself ragged, and then, you know, hauling all of that stuff to farmers markets 3 or 4 times a week, and hauling what I didn't sell back and feeding it to the pigs, and then doing my farming chores at the end of the day, like, so it's rewarding in some ways. I mean, we certainly personally never ate better than those years, but it was so much work.
Okay, thank you. And Diantha, we've got a few questions about your particular chicken tractors. People want to know if you made them or if you bought them, and what size they are, and how many chickens you can fit into each tractor.
Yeah, so we did make them. If you look closely, you can see that they are made with, so there's the bottom is a frame of 2x lumber, and then the hoop part are just bent over cattle panels, which are 4 feet wide. So they can be, they could be 4x4, 4x8, 4x12, just however many cattle panels you want. And what? They're 8 feet wide. Oh, right, they're 8. Yeah, they're 8 feet wide.
The tractors are 8 feet wide.
Right. The tractors themselves are 8 feet wide, and the panels are 16 feet across. But so you can just line up those cattle panels to make the tractor however long you want it to be. Yeah, you can find YouTube videos, and there's a bunch of stuff online. And what's really nice about them is, and we did this last fall, the chickens were done, they went into the winter coop, and then you can just put clear plastic over the top and extend your growing season and use it like a high tunnel. And then how many chickens in each? It depends. We have different sizes. So, and there's lots of resources out there, that tell you how much space a chicken needs. But because we're moving them twice a day, they don't need nearly as much space as they would, if they're in a stationary coop in the same spot all the time. But yeah, and our biggest one, I think we probably had 25 or 30 in our longest tractor. And they do get heavy. We've thought about putting wheels on them. It definitely takes one strong individual to move them through the field. Modifications are coming probably with wheels.
Great. Thank you. And this is for anyone. Can you talk about what you have seen in terms of changes in biodiversity, such as an increase in the number of species in a pasture when you've used these rotational or holistic grazing systems?
I can jump in on that a little bit. I don't always necessarily see a increase in the number of species, but I'll see a change in what species are there. So when I start out, it's often sort of the goldenrod, ragweed, pigweed complex with some grasses underneath, but usually no clover showing. And then as we get the taller weeds under control, partly by grazing management and partly by usually by increasing the pH of the soil with limestone or wood ash, then we start to see the plants that need a little bit more light coming in. Some of the broader leaf grasses, the clovers start to come back. Even without the addition of seed, in a lot of cases, you'll start to see a flush of clover in response to improved pH and more light getting down to the ground. But I guess probably the biggest change in biodiversity that I saw was when I took over a run-out piece of crop ground that had corn silage grown on it since the Carter administration, and changed that into permanent pasture. And last time I counted species on it, I got up to 62. different species of plant. So, there you go from 1 to 62. Some of those 62 I would just as soon not have found, to be honest, but it's better than it just being all silage corn.
Thank you. Does Diantha or Jeffrey or Rebecca, do you have any quick additional comments? And Bill, that was pretty wonderful. Diantha, it looks like you want to add something.
Yeah, I would just say that is exactly what we observed on that parking lot, essentially, that we found when the snow melted. Ragweed, pigweed, all that, and then now it's the broadleaf grasses, and it's the clover, which is so exciting.
Great. Thank you. And there were a few other questions that we didn't have time to ask tonight, but to keep the conversation going, we're using the listserv for Vermont Healthy Soils Coalition, and you can elect to join the listserv when you fill out the post-event survey that will be sent out along with the recording of today's event via Eventbrite. So make sure you fill out that survey to enter this week's raffle as well, and please also donate if you can. 2 weeks from tonight, we've got event 5, Working with the Woods. That's on April 7th from 6:30 to 8 p.m. And that features Sam Perrin of Northwood Stewardship Center, Jim Frone, Grafton County Forester for UNH Extension, and Michael Enchikoy of Sacred Circle Homestead and Permaculture Nursery in Vermont. And I wanted to thank everybody for gathering here today, and especially our speakers. And for those of you who did ask some questions, we'll actually be sending those via email to the speakers and getting those answers and posting them on the listserv for you. So we're very grateful to see you all, and I hope you're enjoying the early spring. Thank you.